Well, this past week here has been quite interesting, to say the least. Been looking into repairs now to our building, as you can see, and that's due to a driver that came and accidentally smashed into the side of our church. Luckily, no one was hurt, and we're very thankful for that. And we here at our end will go about the repairs, we'll take care of it, and we will move on. We'd like to think, though, that the driver had heard about our services here and just couldn't wait to get to church. Based on the damage done on his truck, and not to mention our church, looks like things will change for him permanently. And even though it was an accident, the whole thing took only 10 seconds, and that's all it takes to change things drastically. And notice that if something bad happens, that will lead to at least 10 more good things that will happen. Let's keep the laws of permission in mind now. The Lord will only allow bad things to happen if some good can come out of it. And usually there's more good that comes out of these things than the bad thing itself. But it is amazing to see how actions, however quick they are, especially if they're from certain decisions that we have made, actions can really change things for us, and that can be for better or worse. We can contemplate things for days, weeks, even months, but nothing really happens or changes in us until we put it into action. As soon as we take action, the thought, the idea, and everything behind it then becomes a part of us. And we can see passages in the writings, the doctrines that talk about how even the actions that we would like to take, but don't, still affect us because of the intention that we have. If we intend things, then it's pretty much the same as a completed action. But this is why accidents can be more easily forgiven, because most of the time, the intention is not there. But today we're going to see in our story a man who took certain decisive action, and we get to see how that changed and affected him permanently. So we'll be picking up now from our story with the kids this morning, reading about Belshazzar. He had a party, saw the writing on the wall, and now we get to see Daniel's interpretation of that writing and then the outcome of the story. So this is now from chapter 5, picking up from verse 17. Daniel answered and said before the king, "Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. And because of the majesty that he, the Lord, gave him, all peoples and nations and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up, and whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men, his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and appoints over it whomever he chooses. But you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords and your wives and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the interpretation that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the interpretation of each word. Mene. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and made him a proclamation concerning him that he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So this is another one of those stories of the word that just begs for attention because we have so many interesting details here that we just have to look at. We have to go about it and see what it means. The story overall tells us about what makes our choices and decisions permanent, and also tells us about keeping our natural part of us alive with our spiritual part. And part of that involves not being too overconfident or seeking material things only, but being more happy with what we have. And we'll clarify these things as we move along. But first, let's go through some of the details of the story, because we can understand a whole lot more when we keep in context of everything else. We're in chapter 5 now of Daniel. And between chapters 4 and 5, there's quite a bit of time that lapsed over. There's about 10 years of time between 4 and 5. Nebuchadnezzar is no longer around. He's mentioned, but he's not there. Apparently, he had already passed on. Belshazzar is a new king. And it sounds like he is a son of Nebuchadnezzar, but to be more exact and precise, Belshazzar is actually the son of Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law. So there's some distant relationship there. Now, before Belshazzar came, and between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, there were actually more successors since Nebuchadnezzar, all of which contributed to the glory of Babylon. So by the time Belshazzar came along, Babylon is a great, big, strong empire. And so Belshazzar basically just sits back and relax. Nebuchadnezzar, for the past 4 chapters, represented the love of self in various forms. Belshazzar, too, can represent that, but he's more the form of materialism. You can even call him the love of the world. And that is to seek confidence and strength in external things only. So that's his problem. He most likely has this elevated sense of superiority and confidence because all the work has been done for him. He has no cares in the world now, so he's going to throw this great big party. Meanwhile, the Persians are infiltrating the city and getting ready to invade. We know that's the case because they jumped out right at the end, which means they had to have been there ahead of time to get that far. We see in his party, this feast, what really did Belshazzar in and the Babylonians. He gets drunk with wine, along with him the lords, his wives, concubines, and he's using the gold and silver vessels that they took from the children of Israel, from Jerusalem. And that right there points to a very ugly picture, an internal weakness. This is a picture of profanation. And as we learned with the children this morning, that's a mixing of good and bad things together. It causes a lot of damage when that happens. We see this profanation because the gold and silver vessels represent the knowledge of good and truth, the things that the word teaches. And to drink wine from them was to profane these things. And so this is similar to mocking the things that the word teaches. Now, even worse is that they call these gold and silver things their gods. These gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, and they call these things their gods. And that is idolatry. The definition of idolatry is external worship with no internal. What does that mean? It's pretty much the same thing as a body with no soul. The life inside was extinguished, and on that account, they were judged. They were finished. And that's when Belshazzar sees the writing on the wall. Now, according to the letter of the word, the literal sense, it really does seem like it was just a hand floating and writing these things on the wall. No implement of any kind, no utensils, just probably using the fingers to make these marks on the walls. A very fascinating kind of image or vision. Usually when people see angels or spirits in the Word, you see the whole being. But here we just have a hand. And even though it's a vision, it was permanent because the markings on the wall stayed. People can come back and check them out afterwards. And Belshazzar's reaction to this is quite genuine. His hips were dislocated, his knees were trembling, and that shows that he was genuinely overcome by fear. It also shows the power of the spiritual over the natural. That the spiritual is way more powerful than the natural. And we know this to be true in our own experience. Our bodies, as strong as they are, become instantly weak and crumble under the weight of the Spirit. Anyone who's ever cried before knows this to be true. If our bodies become weak under emotional pressure, imagine how much more weak it would be under spiritual pressure. So there is a genuine fear here, and the reason why too is because the knees correspond to the connection the point where the spirit connects with the natural. And that spirit can way overcome that natural part, which is the cause of the knees trembling. Now, we can learn more about Daniel's interpretation of the writing on the wall. The writing on the wall is really what it's all about. The whole story revolves around the writing. The title of our talk today, too, is The Writing on the Wall. And I think even the title of the story in the Word, if you look in the Word itself, it says The Writing on the Wall, and then you read the story. And this is a popular expression these days, too. People say it, The Writing on the Wall, and it really is thanks to this story. People use that expression to tell someone else that something bad is going to happen as a result of a bad decision or action that they took. It's a warning, a very clear warning, to let the person know that they have passed the point of no return and there is no changing it. Something bad will happen. So it really is more like a prophecy. The writing on the wall is like a prophecy. We definitely see that's true in Belshazzar's case. But before we talk about that, let's just say some things about writing in itself, because writing is very significant for this story. There's just something about the act of writing that has power, makes things permanent and official. We do it all the time, to write things down. It makes things permanent and official. It seals the deal. We can have a million thoughts, but we only remember the ones that we write down. And it's really the act of writing, even if it's just pen and paper, the act of writing inscribes that idea under our minds, in our memories. So even if we never look at the paper again, we remember it better because there's just that connection that takes place. Things are remembered better when we write it down. That's also the reason why, if there's something important that we're talking about, we ask to put it in writing. If there's an important deal or contract, we sign our names, we put it in writing. When it's in writing, it's official and it's hard to undo. It's permanent. And for this reason, that's the reason why we call the heavenly doctrine the writings. Because we have divine revelation, which is way up there beyond our comprehension, which is now brought down to our comprehension and made permanent in writing. It's forever there. So it's important to learn more about this. So I'm going to read a little bit from our teachings. The power of writing in itself. This is from the Apocalypse Explained, number 898. The meaning of writing in the Word. To write signifies certainty, because writing is the ultimate act of thought and of speech therefrom, and thus it means what is certain because what is terminated. This may be compared with all things that a man wills things and speaks therefrom and does not terminate by doing them, because such things are not yet in a man's life, for the ultimate in which prior things exist together is lacking. So basically, writing things confirms and seals the things that came from the Spirit. And the same is true with our actions and our words and the things we do. When we put things into action, it makes it real and official and permanent. And so we learn that that is what we do. And because of that, we learn how to think carefully before we act, to make sure that our actions are true and good. Now, the writing on the wall for Belshazzar confirmed that he was doing something bad, and this is very similar to the story in the Gospel of John, where Jesus was writing on the temple floor when they brought the woman in caught in the act of adultery. We are not given to know what he actually wrote on the temple floor, but we do know that by writing, he was judging the church at that time. He was sealing their fate, so to speak, which is the fate that they had brought upon themselves. So this is the same with Belshazzar and the Babylonians. The writing on the wall sealed their fate. But it wasn't the writing that sealed their fate, it was their own actions that sealed their fate. The writing simply confirmed it, brought it to their attention, made them realize it, that the weight of their actions was finally sinking in. Now Daniel comes along, and he talks about the words on the wall. He said that they wrote mene, tekel, upharsin, which is probably translated into Hebrew for the sake of the word, but there's no telling what the actual markings on the wall look like. All we need to know is that Daniel knew. And now because of him, we get to know. Thanks to Daniel, thanks to the word, thanks to the heavenly doctrine, we can get an idea of what this means. So going through that quickly, mene, as Daniel said, means numbered. And you can compare that to our common phrase these days, your days are numbered. And that's also what Daniel said, finished. It's like you are now finished. And to be more specific, being numbered indicates the quality as to truth. How much truth they knew, how much truth they had. And so then the next one, tekel, means measured. So you can think about this as evaluation, sizing up, taking a good look, and it indicates the quality as to good. How much good they knew and how much good they had. So then the final word, upharsin, means divided. Meaning all the things that they had of good and truth, anything they had of heaven in general, was separated from them, divided. And you think about it, that is exactly the definition of judgment. Judgment means separation of good and bad things. It was bad for Belshazzar because all the good was being taken from him. He didn't seem to get it though, because he was happy and glad of Daniel's interpretation. So, oh great, put on the robe and the chain, celebrate him. But he didn't really have the wisdom to understand what was going on. So eventually he was slain. So, wrapping up, what can we learn from this? We can see that Belshazzar's life was over before he was slain. He was too immersed, or he represents that immersion of natural, physical things only. And these things don't mingle very well with spiritual, heavenly, holy things. We hopefully won't take it that far or put it on that level, but it is something that we need to look out for. Material, natural things. And I don't mean just possessions, but things on a natural level. How much do we get carried away by natural things? How much do we think about natural things only? Or in Matthew's case, how much do we worry about the things that we'll eat and drink and wear tomorrow? How much do we worry about the things of the future? We have to deal with these things. We have these concerns, and these are the kind of concerns that can make us lose sight of spiritual values, principles, and most importantly, our trust and confidence in the Lord. Trust and confidence in the Lord has been consistently displayed by Daniel all along. He was sort of off the side of this story, but a good reminder that Daniel, that trust and confidence in the Lord, is always part of us. It's always there, and we can always tap into it. So I'd like to end today from a quote from the Heavenly Doctrines that talk about the happiness and peace that people have when they have no care for the morrow, which is really the future. So I'd like to read now from the Arcana Celestia, number 8478. Says, the case with those who trust in the divine. These, notwithstanding that they have care for the morrow, still have it not, because they do not think of the morrow with solicitude, still less with anxiety. Unruffled is their spirit, whether they obtain the objects of their desire or not. And they do not grieve over the loss of them, being content with their lot. If they become rich, they do not set their hearts on riches. If they are raised to honors, they do not regard themselves as more worthy than others. If they become poor, they are not made sad. If their circumstances are mean, they are not dejected. They know that for those who trust in the divine, all things advance toward a happy state to eternity, and that whatever befalls them in time is still conducive thereto. This is a great reflection of what seeking first the kingdom of God really means. That to seek the Lord, to seek the kingdom of God, is to place those spiritual values, those teachings, those truths above all else in life. And the more we do that, the less we place our worries and concerns and even pleasures into external things only, or even the future. So next week, we'll conclude our series on Daniel with the story of him being thrown into the lion's den. And this will be a good story that will tell us something about the Lord and how he's able to give us states of heaven, regardless of the conditions of our life and the world. More on that next week. For now, let us pray.